Hey everybody, I'm Greg working on a pandemic project which is replacing the seals and the bearings on a 1981 Yamaha G1 golf cart. It's December 3rd, 2020, and replacing the seals is not a difficult job. You can do it with the engine on the cart. However, when you do that, when you pull the seals, make sure you inspect the bearings behind it. I had no intention of having to pull the crankcase. Everything seemed in good order there until I took a closer inspection of the bearing on the behind the flywheel or fan side seal. So you can see that the nylon or plastic cage is completely missing. So today's project is to insert new bearings and seals into the crankcase. So let's see what's cooking on the other side of the camera. So I've got the convenience of a nice kitchen down in my basement shop. And so what we're going to be doing is warming up these shells so that the bearing surface or where the bearing seats hopefully enlarges, expands a little bit. And we'll do that on both cases. And then the new bearings have been sitting up in the freezer overnight, so hopefully they are freezing and contracting smaller so that hopefully they will just insert right and drop right into basically the recessed area to accept the bearing. Now, anticipating that I may need to tap those in to fully seat it, I've come up with a couple of tools to have on hand. One is, this is actually part of the Tusk brand crankcase separator and crankshaft puller tool that I've got available, and it's just wide enough to just a little smaller diameter than the outer race. So if I need to tap on it, I'm tapping on the outer race and not the inner race, but that way it will seat it down hopefully into the bottom of the cavity or bearing cavity recess, call it what you will. Okay. On the smaller bearing over on the fan side, I went and found a 3/4 inch drive socket that is just slightly narrower than the bearing itself. And so just in case this bearing lip here, edge of the bearing, seats below the surface of the crankcase, then that's why you need something of smaller diameter, outer diameter, so it can pound it deeper into the hole. Now, problem that I've got with this case, the clutch side, is in heating it up, I was thinking, well, you can do it right on a hot plate or the cooktop here, but you see it doesn't sit flat. And that's because it's got a couple of alignment pins for when the crankcase mates up. Well, that's what they are, help with alignment and mating of the two surfaces. So I don't imagine that the heat will transfer uniformly from there. So in my case, I'm going to throw them in the oven for a couple hours or however long it takes, and maybe get them up to about 200, 250 degrees, and hopefully that'll expand it. Now, some of you can, lacking that, you can also try a heat gun and gradually and uniformly heat up the bearing surface. And I actually did that to remove the bearing. You can maybe even use a propane torch to do the same thing. So, and then one final thing is, if we need to do, basically in this case, if we need to tap this big bearing into place on the clutch side, because there are two alignment pins, and these are for the oil pump gear case, because those extrude from or extend from the case, really, if I'm pounding on it, then I'm pounding right on the tips of these pins. So I went and got a scrap piece of lumber, drilled a couple holes, and make sure you get this top hole close enough to cover this surface right here, but miss this surface because this sticks out farther than this mating surface here. So now when we stick it in the two holes, now that is flat against that board. Now I can just set this on a flat surface. You'll see that the pins don't extend through the board in any way. It's flat because now this piece of the crankcase extends over the board. So we've got a nice solid surface to pound on. Okay, so we've got the case heated up to about 250 degrees. I just took the bearing out of the freezer. The instructions say if there are any markings on the bearing, manufacturer part numbers, place those facing out. That dropped right in, just slicker than snot. So just as a no effort at all. No effort at all. The one thing that I do recall, you know, if you're sliding this on, make sure you hold that down a while it cools, and just to make sure that that is fully seated. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'll have to go get the other bearing out of the freezer. I didn't realize it was just going to be this easy of a task. So let me run upstairs and get the other bearing out of the freezer, and we'll go ahead and install that now. Okay, we'll take the other case out of the oven. We're at a toasty 250 degrees. And remember, this is the side, the clutch side, that's got the pins in it. So we're going to use this board with holes in it. And again, find any markings on the bearings, and those face out, or out, depending on how you got this positioned. Okay, oh, that one slipped right in too, super. And so we're just going to hold those down. Actually, both of them I'm going to put a little weight on it just to make sure that they are properly seated. I've seen some videos where they put the bearings on the crankshaft first, and they do it by heating up the bearing in a little tin of oil, and then drop the bearing onto the crankshaft. And once in a while that bearing will maybe, let's say, bounce up away from its final position. So you got to make sure that it is firmly seated, which I'm not concerned about in this case. But there you have it. I mean, that is easy. So now we'll let the bearings cool down. The cases, everything, excuse me, the bearings are cold. We'll let the cases cool down. We'll flip them over, and we'll install the seals.